In the heart of the Gospels, amidst the parables of mercy and the sermons of love, Jesus Christ delivered some of his most stark and chilling warnings. He spoke of a future time when many would come in his name, a time of spiritual deception so profound that if it were possible, even the elect would be led astray. He commanded his followers to be vigilant, to test every spirit, and to be on guard against false prophets who would come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. For centuries, Christians have sought to understand and apply this solemn warning. But in the modern world, as civilizations and religions interact on a global scale, this ancient warning forces us to ask a difficult and unavoidable question. How do we, as Christians, discern the spirits today? How do we apply the timeless criteria given by Christ to the great religious figures who have come after him? Chapter 1. The Great Commission and the Final Prophet. To understand the Christian concept of a false prophet, we must first understand the absolute finality of the Christian revelation. The Catholic faith is built upon a singular, world-altering event, the Incarnation. In the person of Jesus Christ, God himself entered into human history, becoming one of us. As the letter to the Hebrews proclaims, in many and various ways God spoke of old to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days he has spoken to us by a Son. This is the definitive statement. The revelation of God is not an ongoing series of disconnected messages. It is a single story that reaches its absolute climax and fulfillment in Jesus Christ. He is not just another prophet in a long line of prophets. He is the very Word of God made flesh. Therefore, the mission he gave to his apostles, known as the Great Commission, was not to prepare the way for another future prophet. It was to go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. The deposit of faith was closed with the death of the last apostle. Christ's revelation is complete. This is the foundational lens through which the Church understands all subsequent religious claims. Any prophet or messenger who comes after Christ is not judged on their own merits, their personal sincerity, or the beauty of their message alone. They are judged against the one unchanging standard, Jesus Christ, and the public revelation he entrusted to his Church. The primary test, therefore, is one of continuity and consistency. Does a new prophet affirm the revelation of Jesus Christ in its fullness, or does he seek to alter, subtract from, or replace it? Chapter 2. The biblical criteria for a false prophet. Jesus did not leave his followers without a clear set of criteria for discerning truth from error. Throughout the Gospels and the Epistles, the Bible gives us a practical toolkit for identifying a false prophet. The first and most important test is the test of Jesus Christ. St. John is brutally clear in his first epistle. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. But what does it mean to confess Jesus? From the Church's perspective, this is not merely an acknowledgement that a man named Jesus existed. It means confessing him for who he truly is, the Son of God, the second person of the Holy Trinity, who became incarnate, suffered, died, and rose from the dead for our salvation. Any teaching that diminishes or denies the full divinity and humanity of Jesus Christ fails this primary test. A prophet who demotes Jesus to the status of a mere human prophet, no matter how revered, is, by this Johannine definition, not speaking from the Spirit of God. The second test is the test of the gospel. St. Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, issues a powerful anathema. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. The gospel that Paul preached was the good news of salvation through the grace of God, won by the sacrificial death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Any new revelation that proposes a different path to salvation one that replaces the salvific power of the cross with a system of laws. Works or human effort alone is, according to St. Paul, a different gospel and must be rejected. The third test is the test of the fruits. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives this practical advice. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? The Church understands these fruits in two ways. First, there are the moral fruits in the life of the prophet and their followers. Does the new teaching lead to holiness, charity, peace, and unity, or does it lead to division, violence, and licentiousness? Second, and more importantly, there are the doctrinal fruits. Does the new teaching cohere with the established deposit of faith? Does it lead to a deeper understanding of the truths revealed by Christ, or does it contradict them? A true prophet's teaching will bear the fruit of consistency with the orchard of divine revelation that came before it. Chapter 3. The Catholic Church and Islam, a respectful disagreement. Armed with these biblical criteria, we can now turn to the specific question of Islam. It is essential to approach this topic with the clarity and charity that the Catholic Church herself models. The Church holds Muslims in high esteem. The Second Vatican Council's document Nostra Aetate explicitly states that the Church has also a high regard for the Muslims. They worship God, who is one, living and subsistent, merciful and almighty, the Creator of heaven and earth. The Church acknowledges that we share a common heritage as children of Abraham, and that Muslims revere Jesus as a great prophet and honor his Virgin Mother, Mary. This is the foundation of respectful dialogue. However, dialogue does not mean erasing essential differences, and it is in applying the biblical criteria that the profound and irreconcilable disagreements between Christianity and Islam come into focus. From the perspective of Catholic theology, the message of the Prophet Muhammad, while containing many truths, stands in direct contradiction to the definitive revelation of Jesus Christ on several key points. First, regarding the identity of Jesus, Islam explicitly denies the central truth of the Christian faith. The Quran repeatedly and forcefully rejects the doctrine of the Trinity and the divinity of Jesus Christ. It teaches that Jesus was a great human prophet, but he was not the Son of God. For a Christian, this is not a minor disagreement. This is the very heart of the faith. To deny the divinity of Christ is to fail the primary test laid out by St. John. Second, regarding the nature of the gospel, Islam presents a fundamentally different path to salvation. It is a religion of absolute monotheism and submission to the will of God through the observance of the law as revealed in the Quran. It rejects the Christian understanding of original sin, and therefore it rejects the necessity of the atoning sacrifice of Christ on the cross. In fact, Islam teaches that Jesus did not die on the cross at all. For a Christian, this is not a different gospel. It is the antithesis of the gospel preached by St. Paul. These are not superficial differences. They are a direct clash of foundational truth claims. The Catholic Church, therefore, while respecting the sincere faith of Muslims, is bound by her fidelity to Jesus Christ to hold that the revelations of Muhammad are not of divine origin because they contradict the final and complete revelation that God gave us in his Son. From the perspective of official Catholic teaching, the prophet of Islam is not a true prophet of God, because his message seeks to replace the gospel, demote the Son of God, and deny the salvific power of the cross. This theological conclusion is not born of animosity, but of a commitment to the words of Jesus himself. But how does this ancient theological disagreement manifest itself in history? The story of the rise of Islam and its interaction with the Christian world is a complex, often violent and deeply consequential history, one that reveals the ultimate fruits of this new revelation. The theological conclusion, drawn from the biblical criteria laid down by Christ and his apostles, is stark and unavoidable from a Catholic perspective. A message that denies the divinity of the Son rejects the salvific power of the cross and proposes a different gospel cannot be from the same divine source. But Jesus gave us another profoundly practical test. You will recognize them by their fruits. The ultimate test of any revelation is its effect on the world. Therefore, to continue our discernment, we must turn from the pages of theology to the pages of history, to witness the story of how this new revelation erupted onto the world stage and forever changed the course of Christendom. Chapter 4, The Fruits of Conquest. The Christian faith, born from the command to go and make disciples of all nations, initially spread not by the sword, but by the word. Its first messengers were fishermen and tax collectors, and its first victories were won through preaching, acts of charity, and the courageous witness of the martyrs. For 300 years, the Church endured brutal persecution, converting the Roman Empire from the inside out through love, service, and sacrifice. The historical emergence of Islam in the 7th century presents a dramatically different picture. The new faith erupted out of the Arabian Peninsula with a speed and military force the world had never seen. Within a single century, the armies of Islam had conquered vast swathes of the Christian world. 3 of the 5 great ancient patriarchates of the Church, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria, fell to the sword. The entire Christian continent of North Africa, the land of Saints Augustine, Cyprian, and Tertullian, was completely overrun. The Christian kingdom of Spain was conquered. The advance was only halted in the west at the Battle of Tours in France in 732, and for the next 1,000 years, Christendom would be locked in a near-constant struggle for its very survival. From a Catholic perspective, this history is a critical fruit that must be examined. While Christians have certainly been guilty of unjust warfare, the foundational mode of Christian expansion was evangelization. The foundational mode of Islamic expansion was military conquest. The goal was the establishment of a global political and religious caliphate, the Dar al-Islam, or House of Submission, in which the law of the state was the law of the religion. This history of forced conversion, holy war or jihad, and the subjugation of Christian peoples stands in stark contrast to the methodology of Jesus, who told Peter in the garden, "Put your sword back into its place." Chapter 5. The subjugation of the dhimmi. What happened to the millions of Christians who found themselves living in the conquered lands? They were not always forced to convert on pain of death. Instead, they were often relegated to a specific, legally defined second-class status known as the dhimmi. While often presented as a form of medieval tolerance, the reality of the dhimmi status was one of systematic discrimination and subjugation, designed to ensure the supremacy of Islam and to create immense social pressure on Christians to convert. Under Islamic Sharia law, Christians were required to pay a special tax known as the jizya, a poll tax levied on non-Muslims that was often financially crippling. They were forbidden from building new churches or even repairing existing ones without permission, which was rarely granted. Public displays of the Christian faith, such as ringing church bells or holding religious processions, were outlawed. A Christian could not testify against a Muslim in a religious court. They were often forced to wear distinctive clothing to mark them as inferior, and were subjected to numerous other social humiliations. This system had a devastating and predictable effect over the centuries. The ancient Christian heartlands of the Middle East and North Africa, once the vibrant intellectual and spiritual centers of the faith, slowly withered. Under the constant weight of social, legal, and economic pressure, Christian populations declined, and Islam became the dominant faith. The great Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, the largest and most glorious church in Christendom for 1,000 years, was converted into a mosque, its sacred mosaics plastered over, a powerful physical symbol of the subjugation of the Christian faith under Islamic rule. This too must be considered one of the historical fruits of this new revelation. Chapter 6. A different God, a different gospel. Beyond the historical fruits of conquest and subjugation, there are the ultimate theological fruits, which reveal a vision of God and a plan for humanity that is fundamentally different from the revelation of Jesus Christ. At the heart of Christianity is the revelation of God as Father. Jesus taught us to pray to our Father, Abba, an intimate term of loving trust. The entire Christian life is a participation in the inner life of the Trinity. We are adopted sons and daughters of the Father, in the Son, through the Holy Spirit. In Islam, this concept is considered one of the worst forms of blasphemy. The Quran explicitly states that Allah has no son. The relationship between God and humanity in Islam is not one of filial love, but of a master and a slave. The very word Islam means submission, and a Muslim is one who submits. This leads to a different gospel. Christ's great commandment, the law of the new covenant, is a law of love. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. In contrast, the foundation of Islam is submission to the divine law of the Quran. While both faiths teach obedience, the character of that obedience flows from a different understanding of God. For the Christian, our obedience is the loving response of a child to a good father. Finally, there is the rejection of the cross. The cross is the definitive symbol of God's self-sacrificing love, his agape. It is the proof that God was willing to suffer and die for his beloved children. As we noted, Islam denies this historical event. The denial of the crucifixion is not a minor point. It is a rejection of the very mechanism of Christian salvation and the ultimate revelation of the character of God. The historical record, combined with the profound theological chasm separating the fatherhood of God from the mastership of Allah, and the cross from its denial, presents an unavoidable conclusion from a Catholic perspective. The fruits of this new revelation appear to be a different gospel and a subjugation of the Christian faith. This leads to a difficult but necessary question for our time. In an age that prizes tolerance and dialogue above all else, how is a faithful Christian to respond? Are we called to a naive syncretism that papers over these irreconcilable differences, or to a hostile crusader mentality that rejects dialogue? The Catholic Church, guided by 2,000 years of wisdom, proposes a third way, a path of courageous truth and compassionate love, a path that requires us to be both clear in our convictions and charitable in our engagement. The stark theological disagreements and the often painful history that separates the Christian and Islamic worlds presents the modern believer with a profound challenge. In an age that often demands a simple choice between absolute tolerance and absolute hostility, how are we to navigate these realities? If we are to be faithful to Christ's warnings about false prophets and false gospels, must we then embrace a new era of conflict and crusading? And if we are to obey Christ's command to love our neighbor, must we then ignore the irreconcilable truth claims that divide us? The Catholic Church, drawing from the wisdom of the gospel and 2 millennia of experience, rejects this false dilemma. She proposes a third way, a difficult but necessary path, the path of caritas in veritate, of living and speaking the truth in love. Chapter 7. The path of love in truth. Caritas in veritate, or love in truth, is a foundational principle of Catholic thought, famously articulated by Pope Benedict XVI. It is the conviction that genuine love and authentic truth are not opposing forces. They are inseparable. True love for another person is not served by hiding the truth from them, and the truth must always be presented with genuine love and respect for the dignity of the person. This principle provides the framework for the Church's engagement with the modern world, and especially with Islam. First, there is the demand of truth. The Church teaches that it would be a failure in charity to pretend that all religions are the same, or that the differences between them do not matter. Fidelity to Jesus Christ requires the Church to continue to proclaim what she knows to be the truth, in its fullness, that Jesus is the Son of God, the sole Savior of the world, and that the church he founded is the ordinary means of salvation. This is not an act of arrogance, it is an act of obedience to the Great Commission. To lovingly witness to the truth of the gospel, even when it is unpopular, is a sacred duty. Second, there is the equally important demand of love. This same fidelity to Christ requires the church to condemn all hatred, all violence and all unjust discrimination against Muslims. It requires us to see the image of God in every Muslim neighbor, to respect their sincere devotion, and to seek out areas of common ground where we can work together for the common good. This is the path of authentic dialogue, a dialogue that is not based on pretending differences don't exist, but one that is pursued with mutual respect despite those differences. Chapter 8, the call of Nostra Aetate. This third way was officially and authoritatively articulated by the Second Vatican Council in its groundbreaking 1965 declaration, Nostra Aetate, which means in our time. This document forever shaped the Church's official relationship with non-Christian religions. The section on Islam is particularly important. Far from being hostile, it begins with words of profound respect, acknowledging what we hold in common, our shared belief in the one, merciful Creator God, our spiritual connection to Abraham, and the high honor Muslims give to Jesus as a prophet and to his Virgin Mother, Mary. After laying this foundation of respect, the Council makes a direct and urgent appeal to all Catholics and Muslims. It states, although in the course of the centuries many quarrels and hostilities have arisen between Christians and Muslims, this sacred synod urges all to forget the past and to work sincerely for mutual understanding, and to preserve as well as to promote together, for the benefit of all mankind, social justice and moral welfare, as well as peace and freedom. This is the official mandate of the Church. It is a call to move beyond the historical grievances and to work together on shared values, protecting the family, caring for the poor, and defending religious freedom in an increasingly secular world. It is a perfect embodiment of the love in truth principle. It does not erase the theological disagreements, but it refuses to allow them to become a permanent justification for hostility, calling us instead to a future of peaceful and respectful coexistence. Chapter 9. The witness of the saints. How is this difficult path of love in truth lived out in the real world? The Church gives us the example of the saints. Consider the life of Saint Charles de Foucauld, a French aristocrat who became a hermit monk in the early 20th century. He chose to live his life among the Muslim Tuareg people in the Sahara of Algeria. He did not go there as a crusader or a conqueror. He went there to live a life of silent witness, prayer, and charity. He learned their language, studied their culture, and served them with profound love, becoming a universal brother to all. His goal was not to engage in polemical debate, but to live the gospel so authentically that his Muslim neighbors might be drawn to the love of Christ through him. A more modern example is St. John Paul II. He was one of the strongest defenders of Orthodox Christian doctrine in modern history, and yet he was also a tireless champion of interreligious dialogue. He was the first pope to visit a mosque. He met with Muslim leaders from around the world, and he consistently called for peace and mutual respect between Christians and Muslims. St. John Paul II and St. Charles de Foucauld show us what is possible. They demonstrate that it is possible to hold fast to the fullness of Christian truth without reservation, while simultaneously extending a hand of genuine friendship and compassionate love to our Muslim neighbors. Final conclusion. We began with the stark and solemn warnings of Jesus Christ to beware of false prophets. We examined these biblical criteria and saw how, from a Catholic theological perspective, the message of the Prophet of Islam stands in contradiction to the definitive revelation of God in his Son. We then looked at the historical and theological fruits of that message and how they led to a profound and irreconcilable chasm between the two faiths. But having established this, we discovered that the ultimate Christian response is not what the world might expect. Faced with these difficult truths, the Church does not call us to a spirit of hatred, fear, or animosity. Instead, she calls us to the difficult and narrow path of caritas in veritate, love in truth. This means we are called to be courageous witnesses to the truth of Jesus Christ, never compromising our faith. And in the very same breath, we are called to be compassionate neighbors, respecting the dignity of every Muslim and working together for a more just and peaceful world. The ultimate response to a message that we believe to be untrue is not to answer with anger, but to live the truth of the gospel so joyfully, so charitably, and so completely that the love of Christ becomes a light that has the power to draw all people to himself.